when I ask myself, what's the most important trend I see, I have to say it's maybe in comparison to some of these other things, it's under the radar, but this trend is tectonic. And I call it the positive revolution in the human sciences. There's lots of examples of this, but the most profound, for example, is Marty Seligman. Marty Seligman, when he was president of the American Psychological Association, huge association of all the scientists and sciences that are happening in the human sciences. And as president, he got disturbed and he looked and he called for a study to look at, let's say, 44,000 journal articles in the human sciences, published, refereed journal articles, very well done articles. And his question was, to what extent are the human sciences focused on human deficit, deficiency, breakdowns and relationships and so on, or human potential or human opportunity? And honestly, what they found was something like this. It was about, out of the 44,000 journal articles, 98% was on what's wrong with the human being. Breakdown in families, codependency, anxiety, fear, depression, on and on and on. There was scarcely a study on hope or inspiration or joy or the topics of human thriving and flourishing. That was puzzling, 98% of the field. So was this a field of human deficit? And so Marty called at that time in a major speech for a revolution in the psychology in the field of the human sciences. Why can't we at least have a 50-50 of studying the higher potentials and strengths and capacities, and what does it look like when human systems are flourishing and most alive and growing and growth promoting? Can't we at least have a 50-50? Well, since that time, my whole bookshelf has completely changed, and it's some of the most exciting books and research that I have ever seen. The reason why I think this is such a super trend, such a super important trend, is that the human sciences feed our theories of change, feed our theories of education. They feed and fuel our theories of leadership and so on. So you're going to get a lot of material on some of the most profound work that's happening in the world. For example, Barbara Fredrickson's work, a top scientist. She received the largest monetary award in the history of psychology for her work shifting the question. Her question was a simple one, but what good are positive emotions in human systems and human lives? She had 10 emotions, and like hope, inspiration, joy, creativity, curiosity, when we're like a child with enthusiasm for learning. And you're going to get into that begins to shift the way we think about change. For example, positive emotions, when we are in a more elevated state, we're more creative as managers, as leaders, as physicians, whatever. Our teams are more powerful. We're able to see, like if I'm in a mood of hope and inspiration, I'm able to see your strengths and your capacities. So there's a cognitive part of it where we're actually smarter, where we actually, our brains and our relationships are stronger. But there's another part of it as well, and she's found this in physiological research, where you can literally reverse past negative patterns. Let's say you grew up in a home that was filled with anger and fear and alcohol, whatever, that records itself in neuron patterns. Well, what they're finding is all we need, if we can cultivate more conditions in our families and workplaces of hope and inspiration, the whole complex of positive emotions, it actually reverses those things. It creates resilience in marriages where there's a 5-to-1 ratio of positive to negative self-talk about our marriage. What we're finding in other kinds of research is that the image of the future is in our inner dialogue. We're a good company. We're not such a good company. And it's the way people talk about the future. And there's studies at the individual level. We're all talking to ourselves about ourselves and our future and our potentials and our opportunities or our weaknesses and so on. And what they're finding in individuals, it's that the image of the future predicts so much. It predicts healing from a heart heart surgery, patients who have like a 1-to-1 ratio. Oh my gosh, the heart catheter might get stuck in my heart. There's a good chance I could die. And then maybe they counterbalance that with, but I do have, some support. But what they're finding is that the healthiest patient outcomes are when there's a 5-to-1 inner dialogue. This is a great hospital. It's one of the best physicians. I have a community and a family of prayer and support behind me. Just think about that. What's the ratio of positive to negative self-talk, for example, in your organization? That's where the vision of the future, it's not a visual, but it's dialogical. We're a good place. We're not a good place. Anyway, you're going to get into a lot more and important stuff. For example, the same findings around the rise and fall of cultures. What do you guess the ratio is of positive to negative self-talk in our big city newspapers? you know well, there has been a study on that, and it's at least 90% negative news to 10%. Does that mean that that's the reality? Maybe not, but what we start to become sensitive to is the role of our images of the future, our role of what good are positive emotions, the ways in which we carry things through our inner dialogue. And this has implications for appreciative inquiry up and down the line that you're going to discover. And so I think the bottom line for it, for me, what excites me about this as a macro trend is that it shows us that we've underestimated the role of the positive in leading change. What does it mean then to surround a change agenda in hope and inspiration and joy? What does it mean to surround a change agenda in all the strengths in the system? The implications are profound, and I know that this is one of the areas where when we do workshops, people say, this is life-changing. This is changing the way I relate to my son and daughter. This is life-changing the way I think about change. This is life-changing as I think about our culture and our organization and our community.